Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Spoiler Force Podcast. You can find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and make sure to follow Spoiler Force Podcast on Facebook.
This is Lauren,
And Daryl.
and you're listening to Spoiler Force Podcast.
All right, so this is episode 55 of Spoiler Force Podcast. My name is Ricky, and thank you for tuning in. This week's guest is very, very special to me, and I'm so excited because they are my first guest from the UK. And also, I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan, for those of you who don't know. And these guys just blew me away with their knowledge and with their videos and content. And they also have the most downloaded Final Fantasy podcast as well. So let me just introduce my guests here, Daryl and Lauren of Final Fantasy Union. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having us on. That was
Yeah.
quite an intro.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, as I was saying off the air with you guys, I'm a new fan, so listening to your content for like the past 3 or 4 months now, it was very surprising to me. And now with like this, I don't know if you guys are still dealing with it, but the COVID-19 stuff that's happening around, I really took some time, like the past couple of weeks, to just listen to your content, and especially with Final Fantasy VII Remake being released, it was just it just all fell together. And then like when I emailed you guys, and then Lauren responded back pretty quickly, but then like that week, and I was just so shocked by that. And like you can just hear it in my voice, like I'm still kind of like nervous a little bit, but so happy to have you guys on. And I love how you guys break down these videos and characters, especially with the recent stuff with like the character beginnings and the lore of just like certain characters, and the way how Daryl kind of just narrates the content. And one of my favorite ones is the Tidus and Yuna content. And again, I thought that I was a big Final Fantasy fan, but the way you guys just know all the content, and even to where like even the names of the staff members of Square Enix, I was just like, man, I don't know any of this stuff at all.
Oh, it's absolutely fine. I mean, like, that's the thing. We've been doing this, like, for ages now. Like, Daryl and I, well, Daryl, you started, like, even before me. I've been doing it for almost probably over 10 years now, about. But you started even before me, didn't you?
Yeah, I'd say I probably started writing Final Fantasy editorial content probably around 2008, and I've been part of the community for well before that as well.
The names, they just come to you. They just became like second nature now. Like we kind of obviously like the smaller staff, we're still learning. Like there's so many people who work at Square Enix who like we don't even really truly know yet until they get their project, you know? Like, I mean, Taya Sui, once he got into Kingdom Hearts and stuff, he'd been working at Square Enix for ages, but like he just got his time to shine, you know? So it's like there's so many great, talented people who work at Square Enix who like we don't even know fully the names of yet, but like they come up every once in a while, and you're just like, oh, there's that person. Okay, that's cool. I never heard of him before, but I'll learn his name.
You guys brought up Kingdom Hearts. Is the Kingdom Hearts Union something you guys are doing too, or is that like a partnered group?
Yeah, so I actually got started on Kingdom Hearts Union way back. My friend Lauren, she asked me if I wanted to be a part of a Kingdom Hearts podcast, and at the time, I just wasn't really like doing anything. I was basically in university, kind of. I think I was doing like a mass communications degree or something. Like she asked me, and I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll join. I love Kingdom Hearts. Let me be a part of something." And yeah, I did that for a while, and then I can't remember what year it was, but there was some point where we actually brought in some new people. We brought in Churro and Melissa, and then we had Brandon come in as well. And Brandon is the current host of Kingdom Hearts Union. And then it just got to a point where I couldn't really keep up with the series as much as I wanted to. Like I love Kingdom Hearts, but I'm not as active a fan as I am with Final Fantasy. It just was one of those things like I couldn't get the consoles fast enough for me to be able to play all the Kingdom Hearts games. So I made the difficult decision to leave Kingdom Hearts Union, but left it in very faithful hands of Brandon and Shuro. And yeah, they've been killing it with the Kingdom Hearts podcast. I love especially the original. Um, I've played Kingdom Hearts 2 and I've played like Birth by Sleep and Kingdom Hearts 3. I'm just not as part of the community as I was in my youth.
And Daryl, are you into Kingdom Hearts at all?
Yeah, Lauren's played a lot more of the games than I have. I've played Kingdom Hearts 1 and recently played Kingdom Hearts 3, but that's as far as I've gone.
Oh yeah, I played Kingdom Hearts 3D as well. I did that one
You
for
did. You've played a
review.
lot more than I have.
Yeah.
And you've also played Kingdom Hearts Key as well.
Yeah, there's so many games that
And I
I
think,
played.
for me, it's one of those things where I played the first game because of the connection it had with Final Fantasy. And I was really interested in seeing the Final Fantasy characters in this setting with Disney. It was I liked the game. It didn't draw me in as much as Final Fantasy did, and I don't know if it's just because I was a bit too old at that point. I know that
Mm.
the original Kingdom Hearts really resonated with people who were kind of early teens. I was a little bit older than that at that point, but I think Kingdom Hearts 3 I really enjoyed, but I never really became too invested in the story as much as I did with the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, for me, I was into Kingdom Hearts up until like Birth by Sleep. I think the moment they
Mm.
started branching out to different consoles and different, even like with Nintendo and Sony, like they were just there was just too many games at once. And then with that long like hold of Kingdom Hearts 3 until now or recently, I kind of just gave up because the story just got so crazy with the timelines, and then with Zemnis being like going into like different time frames of himself and bringing them all together. It just got so crazy with the characters. But there is a concept that I am gonna talk about later on with Final Fantasy, so that'll be for later. But for both of you, when did you guys get into Final Fantasy, and like why the actual just the game, and kind of like explain to listeners how you guys started that podcast with Final Fantasy?
I think in some ways, we had similar origins in terms of how we both got into Final Fantasy. So for me, it was that I had never played an RPG before in my life. I was really a PC gamer, and my next door neighbor happened to get a copy of Final Fantasy VII on PC, which is quite rare. And I used to just go around and watch him play games, and he was playing this game, and I just got drawn into what he was doing to the point where I asked if I could borrow the game myself. And it was actually this really weird ordeal for me because around that time, I was probably about 13, 14, and I was really into modding my PC. And I had put in a piece of hardware into my computer that caused a conflict. And so for some reason, it manifested whenever I played Final Fantasy VII. I could play it to a certain point, but the game would crash.
Mm.
And so I played the opening bombing mission so many times because I was hell bent on not accepting that my hardware conflict was causing this problem. And it was just this really like recurring thing that was just kept happening where occasionally I would be able to get really far into the game and then it would just start crashing again and I'd have to keep replaying segments. But I loved the game so much, it didn't bother me
Mm.
at all. And I think the worst point was at the end of disc 2 when you do the Hojo fight, because there's a really long sequence after that. And I didn't have disc 3 because I hadn't borrowed it yet from my next door neighbor and they were on holiday. And so, or I think they were coming back the day I did it. So, and I beat Hojo, got to the disc change, and I turned the monitor off because I knew like I couldn't beat him again. It was just it was too hard, and then my dad turned the computer off.
Oh
So
no.
that was kind of how I got into Final Fantasy. I just got really, really hooked in that game and I just couldn't put it down.
Mm.
And then I just picked up every single one after that, and just every single one, even though they were different, just really appealed to me.
For me, my introduction was a bit less dramatic. I played it on console, so it worked, thankfully. I think what happened was is that my brothers were really into Final Fantasy. They were into games in general, and my parents were divorced, so like I would be able to go over to my mom's house and play my brother's consoles, which I didn't have at my house. At my house, I always had like Sega Genesis up until about, I think I was about 11 when I actually bought my own PlayStation. And I still remember one day I went over to my brother Bobby's house, and he was playing through Final Fantasy VIII at the time. And I just remember the Dullet mission. It was during the Dullet mission in Final Fantasy VIII, and I just saw Quistis shooting down the big, massive spider thing. I will never remember the name of that. Like, there's too many letters for me and numbers to remember the name of that stupid thing. But I just remember seeing Quistis shoot this thing down, looking absolutely badass. Squall running across the beach and jumping into this massive mech. Like, I was just like, this is so cool. Like, I want to play this. But at that time, I just didn't really I didn't even ask him for it. I was just kind of like, this is a really cool game, but like I don't know. I didn't ask him what it was. I didn't ask him anything about it. I just watched and all. And then later down the line, I went to the mall, and every now and then I like to go to the mall and check out the used games section. At the time was paying for games out of my pocket money. Like, I would get like $5 a week or something, and I'd be able to save it up in order to get a game. And I remember I saw the cover of Final Fantasy VIII, and I was like, that looks really familiar. Like, I think this might be the game that he was playing. So I was like, I'm gonna buy it. I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna play it. And so that's how it all started. I played through Final Fantasy VIII, and that was my first Final Fantasy game, and I loved it. It was really hard for me to get into because, again, it was my first JRPG, and I really loved it. I loved the story. I loved Squall, and I loved all the other characters as well. And yeah, so I had no game crashes, thankfully. I think I would have cried if I had game crashes with the PlayStation. But yeah, that's basically how it all started.
Yeah.
As for
Oh, I'm
wider
sorry.
podcasting, though, I think that's quite an interesting question because I
Mhm.
never had any intention of doing podcasting. I'm actually a very introverted
Neither
person.
of us did.
No, and
I can relate to that for sure.
it's kind of a
Yeah.
weird story as to how it actually came about. So I after Final Fantasy 12, I kind of fell out of love with the franchise a little bit, and so I drifted away from the community. But when I was trying to get into programming, I wanted to teach myself PHP, and I thought, well, what's the easiest that I can make a website about? Final Fantasy. So I got back into making websites again, and my website was doing okay. And I started reaching out to other fan sites to affiliate with. And one of them was a website called FXN, and they were a website dedicated to Final Fantasy 13, which was the next game coming out at that time. And they had just started up a podcast called the FXN Final Fantasy 13 podcast.
FXN.
Yes, which was hosted by David and Kyle and Jamie. And I, as part of the affiliation process, I actually reconnect. I knew David from a previous website I'd been on, but we weren't that close. But I knew of him, and I just said like, "Can I come on your podcast as a guest?" I don't know why I did it. It was
Mhm.
just really random. I didn't actually have any gear that I could use to record a podcast. So after they said yes, I was like, "Okay, how am I going to do this?" So I went out and bought a load of equipment that I could use to record a podcast, which was like 2008. Quite random. It wasn't as accessible as it is now, where you've got all these like really easy podcasting mics that are USB friendly and all that stuff. Like that stuff didn't really exist back then. So I had to like I was into music technology, so I knew different things I could get and pull together. But yeah, I went on the third episode of the podcast. I was incredibly nervous. I'd never done anything like it before.
His voice is so
Yeah, I
shaky.
was so
It's
shaky.
so
Listening back to it
cute.
now, it's really embarrassing.
It's really cute.
But I really enjoyed it, and I didn't go on the podcast for another couple of episodes. But then when I did come back on, I was really pushing Kyle to have me back on, and then I ended up being the co-host with Kyle. And then when Kyle decided to leave, I basically took over the show, and then Lauren came on a bit later.
Nice transition to how you got into podcasting too. Then, with just being a guest and just liking Final Fantasy in general. Yeah, because I started off as a group too when I first started podcasting before I did this whole thing with Spoiler Force. Because now I'm just independent, so I don't have any like co-hosts or anything like that. But I was a co-host on another podcast group. Shout out to the guys at Popluck. Yeah, we kind of did the same thing I'm doing now, but the difference was that it was just more people. But I took a break too, and then and pretty much just fell back in love with podcasting and like listening to different people's genres and what they had to say. So I just figured, why not? And Daryl, you brought up the point of like buying equipment and stuff. I kind of wish that I got into podcasting way earlier. Now that I've like invested myself in it, and I gotta say, it is a lot easier now buying equipment than it was back then.
It's
Yeah,
always so funny, like making recommendations on like mics now because it's just so much easier.
yeah, because like Daryl was saying, everything's USB friendly, everything's adaptable now. It's not like before where you had to get only specific items.
Yeah, I actually have some of the gears that I'm still using now. Like I had to find a sound card that could take XLR cables into it. It was really confusing, but I learned a lot at the time. And then when the other guys started coming on board, like Lauren, we were able to find like decent quality USB microphones.
I had a Microsoft Live Chat.
Yeah, when
That
we
was
first
my
started.
first mic, was a Microsoft Live Chat. It was attached to my face. It's Daryl's favorite mic for me because I am a terrible a terrible podcaster. I move my head too much. Terrible for sound quality. I move my head too much. But the Microsoft Live Check was perfect for me because every time I moved my head, the mic was right there with me.
Yeah, I never really used a headset before, but I do move a lot quite a bit. I think for me, it's more like keeping my eyes on the camera, which is why I haven't gotten a camera yet, because I still got to focus on like when I speak to fans on live chats where I have to look at the camera and I look so distracted when I'm not. So I move a lot and I start looking all over the place. But yeah, no, I wanted to add on to what you were saying, Lauren, about Final Fantasy VIII, because that was one of the first games I got introduced to as well. 7 was the first one I played because my cousin had a PC one as well. But with 8, I never got to play it, so I only knew the characters by watching my cousins play. And like I said, like that game cover with Squall, Renoa, and Cypher on there, it's so like embedded into me because that stood out. I don't know why those three characters like stood out to me so much as a kid. And then like my cousins also had those collectible figures that you could buy at the time. So they were always like having them around, and that's all I saw as a kid. So yeah, with Final Fantasy VIII, just the characters really intrigued me, but I really never got to dive deep into the game and play it, which I have to now.
Yeah, it's like it's a thing. It's a hard one. It's a hard sell because the game system is so different. Like it's not as easy as like the sort of material system. Not that the material system like is a piece of piss, but like the draw system really turns people off the junction system in Final Fantasy VIII. But like sort of once you get past that and can just sort of like even if you just follow somebody's guide, there's so many guides to how to work the draw system and like abuse it and make it work for you. That the game is really, really like it's easy. Like it gets to be really easy. Um, but yeah.
And I think the characters as well are it's very different story
Mm.
wise. Like there's a very strong focus around Squall as the main character, and then there's a supporting cast. But I think it's the one that is nice for people around a certain age. Like when we did our Origins video around Squall, so many it's probably that's the video more than anyone else where everyone in the comments was just saying how much Squall resonated with them as individuals because
Mm.
the type of people that typically play this type of game, you know, they are many of them are Squall. They're these introverted people that maybe struggle to express their emotions. They don't really know what to do when people pay attention to them. If they're put in these positions, they don't really know how to deal with them. And I think Squall was really good at helping people relate. And I think yeah, him more than any other character that we featured had those comments of people just saying, I was playing this game when I was 16, 17, the same age as Squall, and I completely understood how he felt and why he reacted the way he did.
I think he is the only one that is like a teenager and actually acts like a teenager.
Yeah, because most of the other characters are still 17.
Which you just don't believe. Like, I don't believe that Cloud is like 17. Like, really? With that face? No.
He looks more like a young adult really than like a teenager.
20, 26 maybe.
Yeah, definitely like in his mid 20s. But speaking of teenagers, Tidus was one of the characters I really enjoyed playing and also like related to the most with Final Fantasy X because as much as I grew up with the older games, Final Fantasy X for me was the one that I completely played by myself and completed it by myself before like all the international versions came out. And with that game, it resonated with me so much too growing up. And like your commentators who say that they related to Squall being the same age as them. When I was growing up, I wasn't the same age as Tidus, but I grew up at that when I was growing up playing that game. I was kind of more aware of the storyline now, so I was able to comprehend what was going on. And with 10 being on the PS2, being one of the first ones with voice acting and the whole CGI cinematic, and having giving Yuna such a huge role into the story too. I kind of just related to both characters, and like I was saying before, with how Daryl narrated these origins for these characters, like it really broke down things that I've never saw in both Tidus and Yuna. And one of the ones I really enjoyed too was how you guys did the comparison of Seymour and Yuna. I never really saw it that way, to where like had Yuna made decisions, she could have ended up like Seymour. Yeah, so I really like how you guys did that with the story, and with 10 too. Like I I was only into like 10 and 10 too, but with like I never knew that there was all that, like the book and the audio sequel. I never knew any of that until I reached out and listened to your guys' stuff, and I was just so amazed by it. And so, do you guys still think there's a possibility that 10.3 may or may not happen?
Um, I think so. I mean, they've talked about it like a bunch. They've sort of what's the phrase? Like they've sort of like baited us a bit with it every now and then. They're just like, we haven't talked enough about Final Fantasy X-3. Let's just give him a bit of blood, you know?
Square Enix have their phrase that they like to use every now and again. So one is please be excited, and the other one is we'll see what the fan demand is like.
Yeah.
So they'll put these things out there, and if there's fan demand, we'll do it. And generally, we actually looked back at it once. Generally, when they say if there's fan demand, they generally end up doing it.
Yeah.
It's just it might take a little while. They've been saying so many comments since the HD remaster came out about the fact that they want to do it, but the 7 remake exists or Kingdom Hearts 3 exists, and they really want the original people to work on it, just like they did with the 7 remake. And of course, it's the same team that worked on the Final Fantasy 7, so it's a difficult position for them. And I guess I kind of wish they would stop talking about it.
I know.
But
Right.
but yeah, I think it will happen at some point. I think it's just that based on what's happened with the 7 remake, I was a little bit apprehensive about why they're making the decision they are about 10.3, because we've talked before about how we'd be quite happy with them just releasing it in the style of 10 or 10.2, just like a kind of classic extension to those games. But having seen how 7 remakes turned out in terms of like the new combat system and the graphics and everything, I would kind of want 10.3 to be in that style.
Mm. Yeah, that would be really cool actually. Um, but yeah, it's so hard with me with 10 because like I love 10. It is my favorite game. Like I just of the series, like it's the one that I find the easiest to play. It's the most fun for me to play. It's the only one that I get a craving to play it, to replay it every once in a while. And the fact that the story does leave on such a cliffhanger with the novel and the audio drama, I'm just like, oh, just finish it because I just want to see what happens to my characters because I love them. But also, I mean, sort of getting back a bit, but thank you so much for your compliment as well on the Yuna Seymour thing. We were toying with that idea for a long time. Like
Years.
I sort of I think it might have been so Daryl and I have this thing, right? Sometimes when we're just washing up dishes, I just kind of blurt out an idea that I have. And like every now and then I have one that's just like a niggle. And this one was the biggest one that I just kept coming back to, and I was just like, Daryl, I have something to say about Yuna and Seymour, but I don't know how to say it. And so he gave me the sort of like objective of I had to come up with the title for it. Like we had to come up with the right title, and then if we got the right title, then we would be able to write the rest of the video. And eventually we did. And yeah, I'm really proud of it because I do think that it's something that people often overlook, especially with Seymour. People always just write off Seymour as an absolute a-hole. There's nothing else about him. He's just a jerk. But it's like there's so much more to his character that like if you just peel it back a bit and like just read between the lines, like he actually is quite tragic, and he probably didn't have to be the way that he was if he had just been given like more love and acceptance in his life. But that's what I love about it. I love the Final Fantasy series. It's so deep.
Yeah,
But
and I think that's one of the things. Like, you know, that video took years for us to make, and we're not exaggerating that. It was probably you came up with the concept maybe like 3-4 years ago
yeah.
before we actually did it. We had a couple of different stabs at it, but each time I wrote the script, we kind of read it back, and I was just like, well, and we both were just like, this doesn't say what we want it to say.
Mhm.
Finally, though, we committed to actually doing it, and we weren't going to release another video until it was exactly how we wanted it to be. And when we published it, we had no idea what the response was going to be, but thankfully it did really well. People really liked it, and I think it's a testament to Final Fantasy X because, as Lauren mentioned, she's played through it so many times. It's probably the one I've played through the most times as well. And every single time we play through it, we learn something more. There's something else we didn't see. And doing those Origins videos, they are by far the longest Origins videos we have ever done. I think Yuna's is almost 15 minutes long. It's like it's almost an hour because there is so much story in there. And I think many people, yeah, like Titus. Sorry, I still can't say Titus. I'm still a
No.
Titus person. Um, but you know, Titus for us is really great. The sacrifice he makes is so much deeper than any other main protagonist. But Yuna also has such strength, and I think she often gets overlooked as a protagonist. And I think 10-2, in some people's view, makes her more impressive, but in other people's view, kind of sullies what she did in the first game. But I think, yeah, 10, it's a game that has so much depth, just so much depth, and you can just keep replaying it, and every single time you find something else out about it. And I think that was obviously when you play through it the second time, you learn more about all the sacrifices. You are looking at things from Titus's perspective, but you now know everything. Whereas with the first time you played through, you were as ignorant as he was. You obviously can get the Al Bhed stuff. You understand a bit more, and it was one of those games where you can keep playing it and you can never get tired of it.
No.
I don't think I've ever gotten tired of that game. And I realize like it's been out for almost 20 years now, which is crazy when I think about it. And that game itself, just like you guys were saying, it's a fun game and it's very simple and it's nothing too hard. But I wanted to add on too, like with how you guys were saying, with his character. What did you guys think of like that? With that ending, I guess with the audio drama, because like now with this, from what is shown, he's kind of different now, right? And with Tensu, the faith kind of says like, they're gonna gather up what's left of him. I've always interpreted that like they only grabbed pieces of him. It wasn't him that came back.
Yeah, they've kind of alluded to the fact that, and in Titus, I think, says it as well, that it's him, but it's not him, and it's really confusing. The audio drama, like what's going on. I think the easy interpretation to make is that like Yuda and Titus are having difficulties, but I think when you look a bit deeper, it's a lot more complicated than that. You did another controversial video about that subject, which was a lot more controversial.
Yeah.
Probably the most controversial video we've done.
Yeah.
But I think it's just that whole thing of Yuna and Titus are in this really difficult relationship. Yuna, she has often, throughout the entirety of the franchise, made decisions without really consulting anyone else. And from the setup, it sounds like she's doing the exact same thing again. She can't tell Titus about anything, really. She needs to keep her distance from him. that he's kind of falling apart as a person because he's not the person he was. He doesn't have the same body anymore, and he needs her support, but she is worried about giving it to him because she's worried that if he learns too much, he's going to disappear.
I think it's almost like a lesson in that, like, everything has a price. You have to pay like almost the Grim Reaper in some regard. Like, you can bring someone back, but it will never be the same as when you left it. And well, at least in this world, maybe not in real life, but even in real life, like we've seen the concept a ton where you want to bring someone back from the dead. Okay, but they might be possessed, but they might be this, they might be that. We've seen it in Black Mirror, you've seen it in Pet Cemetery. Like, there's so many different adaptations of, like, you bring someone back from the dead, but they're never going to be the same kind of person that they were when they died and you loved them originally. And yeah, I think that that's something that they're like on the cusp of exploring in the audio drama. So I feel like that's sort of where they might take it. But yeah.
But I think, the novel that they published was also called The Price of Eternity,
Yeah.
to really harp on that. And I think when we were looking more into Titus and Yuna as characters, I think it's really touched at in the ending of 10-2's DLC, where Yuna, she starts to realize that, yeah, sure, she went on this massive adventure with these people, but it was really an adventure that pulled people together based on circumstance.
Mm.
Like, Riku wants to deal with these things and Pain wants to deal with these things, but Yuna just doesn't. And now that she doesn't actually have to try and save the world, she has no real reason to spend time with these people because she doesn't actually have anything in common with them. And it kind of feels like it's the same with like Titus as well. They were forced together during this really emotional situation. And now that emotional situation isn't there, like, what's the basis for their relationship? And yeah, it seems as though those kind of subjects, they touched on it right at the end of 10-2, the DLC. It feels like those subjects are going to be more brought to the fore. And it's like, it's a difficult subject because it's not all like happy go lucky and everything's going to work out okay for everyone. They made the decision to try and highlight the realities because many Final Fantasies have never touched on that. They generally have that story arc of, okay, there's something threatening the world and you've got a protagonist and he's going to go around or she's going to go around and they're going to have these people that join the party for whatever reason, but you never see the aftermath.
Mm.
But 10-2, you actually did start to see the aftermath, and it feels like they're gonna, when they do it, explore that aftermath even further. And it may be that some of it doesn't go the way that people would want.
Man, I'm blown away, Daryl. You guys are so good at explaining like your points of the points of view of the story, and I'm literally left speechless because like I wanted to mention something and then you guys already answered it, so I'm like, wow. But what did you guys think of the ending of it overall? Like, because when I read through the novel and and listen to the audio drama, like I don't want to say it's fan fiction, but it's almost like that. And there was comments on the videos. There was one saying like, Yuna could have been the reason why everything is happening that's wrong. Like she's like low key villain in a way because she wanted Titus back so bad. And then I also like this one comment too, where like they said where even though we're playing Titus, the main character is Yuna, and I wanted to know like what were you guys' thoughts on that ending overall? Just did you guys like that wrap up, or did you guys just wanted to leave it at 10-2?
I mean, like, I do still have like conflicts of it because I actually feel like my favorite ending of 10-2, the one that left Yuna the strongest, was the sad ending, which is where Titus comes back and he is just simply a ghost. He's the ghost in the far plane. Yuna says her piece and she says like, it's okay. Like, I know you're still gone, but I don't need you anymore because I can be strong on my own. Like, that was my favorite ending of 10-2. And you basically you had to like do nothing in order to get that ending. Like, It was just the worst ending to get, but it's my favorite. It was just such a solid ending. So the perfect ending of 10-2 just always kind of rubbed me the wrong way because I don't like the sort of I don't want to say Mary Sue, but that's literally the only thing I can think of to describe how I felt at that time about that ending. But now that time has gone on and I've sort of reviewed it, I've kind of come to the conclusion that, Nojima like seems to have something like some kind of plan for what's to come. And when he wrote Will and The Price of Eternity, I was just kind of like, obviously he's continuing the story in the way that he wants to, the way that his brilliant brain, I love Nojima so much, the way that he's sort of envisioning it. So even though I wasn't necessarily happy with it to begin with, the fact that he's made it so more complex with this idea that Yuna and Titus shouldn't maybe be together because they were brought together by circumstance, and like Titus is not who you remember him to be. I'm saying Titus and Titus. I just realized.
I know.
I'm like trying
I've
to
been
be
saying
official
that
and
too.
I'm not trying to be official. Whoops. But yeah, like now I'm kind of like, well, because they've done it this way, I actually am really liking it because it's a bit more of a realistic take of what reincarnation actually means, and do we really want this? Like, I'm really intrigued.
And I think Nojimura has said that he's already written 10-3 and he's
Mm.
pitched the idea. Obviously, they just can't proceed with it at this point. I think for me, I kind of hoped it ended at 10. Like, I didn't feel as though 10-2 was really necessary, but that's because I'm kind of old school. Like, none of the other games had sequels. They all wrapped up in a nice way. And the ending of 10 was so impactful. It felt like 10-2 when they brought Titus back at the end, it was a bit of a cop out. And
Which I do agree
and
with.
I think the thing that bugged me a bit, and it's really similar to Final Fantasy 15 as well. It feels like they took away their own creativity to try and write something that they knew was just gonna please people, if that makes sense, because they did 10-2 on the basis of the secret ending they put in the Japanese version of 10, which I think was part of the European version as well, where they had this kind of thing where is Titus back, right?
Yeah,
You're
he
more into
like,
that than me.
yeah, I remember
That
because
was like
we
when
were
he was
talking
under the
about this
water, right? And
originally.
he came out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like we Daryl completely missed that scene. Like I was like, Daryl, when Titus wakes up in the water and he's like, I have no clue what you're talking about. What are you on? And I'm like, it's the scene.
But yeah,
And
so they
yeah,
used that scene as a basis for making 10-2 because they were like, everyone wants to see them together again. So they put that ending in there to give the happy ending that they felt that fans wanted. And, with 15, there was obviously the ending of that. And Tabata went on record saying, well, if you guys want a happy ending, I'll make a happy ending. And that kind of thing frustrates a little bit because it feels like it's not the content that they actually wanted to make.
it's catering.
Yeah, it's kind of fan servicey. So for me, yeah, like 10-2 was a bit fan servicey in that regard. The fact they had all these different tiers of ending, it wasn't really that necessary. But yeah, I'm really curious to see where they would choose to go with it, especially as he wrote those extra pieces with 10-3 in mind, and obviously like Sin's back and stuff, and everyone wants to know why that's the case.
Yeah. How did he come back?
Yeah, I had no idea that they were already or they had scripts for 10-3. I just thought it was kind of like a teaser in a way. Yeah, but with the fan service stuff, it is that stuff is kind of like it does ruin certain content. Like I agree with what you guys said about like how with 15, like throwing out the happy ending like that. It kind of just ruins the story that you've built this whole time and had fans wait for. But with fan servicing as well, with the 7 remake, that was something that fans demanded. I don't consider that fan servicing in a way, but that's something like everyone wanted. With nostalgic value being such a big thing these days, and 7 being released a few weeks ago, or just not even 2 weeks ago. I don't know if I know you guys said on your most recent podcast that you guys were gonna break down the actual story and spoilers. But there was one topic I wanted to talk about. I didn't know if you guys were able to speak on it. It's about the character Zack.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure, we're happy to dive in.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as your listeners are ready for some spoilers.
Yeah, and that's why it's called Spoiler Force Podcast, because I'm just gonna
Exactly.
dive in and rip everything apart. Okay, but if you guys are good with that, then with the ending of Seven Remake, it's something that a lot of fans and even myself weren't expecting. You guys broke down the game pretty well, saying like you guys were kind of glad that it wasn't a shot for shot remake with the system, the battle system, and all that, but with the storyline, with like this whole kind of Kingdom Hearts kind of thing, right? With the multiple timelines and different universes, and Zack being possibly alive. Do you guys have any theories on that? Like, do you guys think that they're gonna intertwine in the sequel to Seven Remake, or is it just some sort of teaser?
I think at this point it's actually really hard to tell. And I think one of the things that's been quite interesting, but also I guess it's kind of frustrating, is that there are a lot of theories rolling around right now, and some of them are being endorsed by different people. And when things get endorsed, they suddenly become fact. And ultimately, right now, we have no idea what is going to happen whatsoever with anything. Zack could be alive. Zack could not be alive. We don't know. Some people have pointed out the fact that the sequence that we see with Zack is actually not really any different to Crisis Core. He does actually survive the initial onslaught against Shinra, only to then be ambushed a bit later and killed. That could still happen. We don't really know. They're obviously trying to tease something. And I guess the fanboy in me would, if they have Zack in the next game and he's playable and he can fight alongside Cloud, that would be incredible. Like, I would be all for that. And if they want to do that, that would be one of the best things they could do.
And I also, like, to a degree, would love to see the sort of banter between Cloud and Zack with Aerith, because obviously, like, if Zack's back and there's interaction between Aerith and, like, there's gonna be a triangle. There's gonna be like a quadricept, because you have Cloud, Tifa, Cloud, Aerith, Zack. Like, it's just, that would just be ridiculous, but it would be really cool. And the sort of power dynamic between the two characters as well, because obviously in the original, Cloud gets a lot of growth because he becomes this great leader, but he is a troubled leader, obviously, because partway through the game he has like a complete mental breakdown, whereas now, like, Zack, he is a leader. Like, he's the positive leader that you want fighting for you. You want him, like, egging you on and stuff. So where is the room for Cloud to fit into the narrative? And if Zack is back, will Cloud kind of be pushed to the background? Will he be fighting to try and be stronger? Will he even want to be leader of the group? Like, it would create a really interesting power dynamic.
There's also some interesting things to consider in terms of Japan, because, and this all came out when they were doing Dissidia NT. Zack is incredibly popular in Japan, to the point where he does even rival Cloud in terms of popularity. So we knew that they were going to have Zack in a bigger way in this game, just because of that. Like, Crisis Core just propelled him into this huge protagonist within the franchise, whereas in the original game he was really a nobody. He was put in right at the last minute in terms of the development of the game. They came up with this brand new story arc, and they were like, yeah, we just got to have this guy in here, let's just give him the same model as Cloud, whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas now he's this huge character. But there are so many different things that are interesting around what they're choosing to do, and the different ways they could take it. Because, one of the other big theories that's coming out is that the Aerith we're seeing is the Aerith from the original game, and so therefore the relationship she has with Zack is very different. Zack and Aerith, Advent Children, Aerith and Zack are like, they're a force. They have a relationship together. As Lauren said, if that is the case, and it's kind of that version of Aerith and there are rumors that it's actually also that version of Zack, then yeah, the dynamic with Cloud is going to be crazy to think about. But then also, Cloud is in Avid Children. He's kind of accepting of the dynamic they have,
Mm.
but would he be accepting of it in Seven Remake?
Yeah, because he's like accepting of it because they're both dead, and he's not dead, so he can't really fight with that. Like he's not dead yet. Doesn't really want to be dead yet, so all right,
But
Zach,
I think
you
he's
won
also,
this round.
he's also got a lot of respect for Zack.
Yeah, he does. Of course. I mean, Zach is pretty much the reason why he is even living.
Yeah,
Um,
there are so many different permutations relating to the ending of the 7 remake
mm,
that it's like someone's going to be right for sure. But like we were discussing earlier, it kind of feels like they just did this crazy ending and they've got a rough idea about what they want to do, but they're just kind of waiting to see what the fans believe is going to happen,
mm.
and then that may steer them a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, they just kind of like built up the little bonfire, put the gasoline around, and then just kind of inching us toward the match like,
Yeah,
"Hey,
I
hey,
mean,
you want to like this? Go ahead."
Katase did say that he was going to be keeping a very close eye on the theories that people were coming out with, because they knew when they were making it that it was going to make people go crazy with all the different theories. I think they even set up like an official spoiler thread on the official Twitter account just to see what people were discussing and stuff. So yeah, it's crazy. But just to take it back in terms of you mentioning Kingdom Hearts, I think there obviously is that connection because of everything that happens within Kingdom Hearts. But it's also interesting because Nomura is the director, but his co-director who's in charge of the story is Motomo Toriyama, who through the 13 franchise, that was also a big part. Time travel was huge in 13 too. And obviously in Lightning Returns, it was part of it as well. So we're getting the time travel thing from both aspects there, and also like the notion of like both of them are really strong on the defying of fate or fighting against fate, destiny. Like Nomura and Toriyama are like they are kind of two pieces of a pod in the same pod, but they've also been working on the games together for a very very long time. They were both two of the prominent creative forces of the original Final Fantasy VII. Obviously back then it was Kitase and Sakaguchi who were leading the way, and like Kitase is still there as the producer, but he's obviously taken some steps back and he's letting Nomura and Toriyama now play out their vision of what the game should have been, or what they thought the game should have been 20 odd years ago.
With Zach possibly coming back, I was thinking like, because I watched my cousin play his play by play on Discord, and he was upset. He was like, "Why are they bringing Zach back? It ruins the picture of Cloud." Because like pretty much he is the catalyst of the storyline. If it wasn't for Zach, there'd be no Cloud. And with him possibly coming back, if he does interact with the group, it does make Cloud look like a background character, like what Lauren was saying. And I thought you guys brought up a good point with Aerith being the one from a different timeline, because I was going along the terms of Sephiroth being the one that he knew he was gonna lose regardless, so he wants to change his fate. I never thought of Aerith being the one that is defying the odds and all that. But that is a great idea to think about. But back to Zach, I feel like with him, it'd be he'd be the main character then. If he comes back, there was so many other theories that me and my friends were talking about, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Spider-Man multiverse stuff, but like having multiple versions of like Advent Children Cloud or the original timeline Cloud just like all interact together, and you pretty much just have them all in the field fighting all these different versions of Sephiroth. Because like with the ending of 7, like the way how they were fighting, it was very close to how Advent Children's last fight scene was, especially how Sephiroth had all those abilities, and then he had the wing, something that we haven't seen in the original Final Fantasy VII, and now they're incorporating more of that into the story.
I think it is really interesting that you say that as well. Like, I mean, like, don't get us wrong. Like, the first time we saw the ending of Final Fantasy VII, remake, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, what, like, why, why,
Yeah,
why?
I think from the moment that the assault on President Shinra changed and it went towards Barrett, we were just like, what is going on right now. And I played the rest of the game from that point on, just solid straight. And I think we were just kind of dumbstruck
Yeah.
with everything that was going on.
And we couldn't talk to anybody about it because we were reviewing it. It was just
Yeah.
like, why? What? Everybody's gonna freak out about this. Why is this happening? I think time like made us sort of appreciate what they've done because like essentially they could have gone to this remake and they could have just given us a blow by blow. This is the Final Fantasy VII remake. It is exactly the same game. It just has prettier graphics and really good storyline. And that's basically what the Final Fantasy VII remake was up until probably about chapter
17.
17.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty much what it was. And like Dara and I were both really into that. Like this is great. This is a great game. But what I imagine sort of was happening was is that when they were writing the Final Fantasy VII remake and sort of talking about how to approach it, writing something that already exists must be so boring for someone like Nomura. Like Nomura is such a creative person. Like if he had just regurgitated the same information, like imagine the fact that they're going to probably be working up on this for about a decade, I would say. Like that must be so soul destroying to just like not be able to do anything. Like you have to stick to the script. This is what the fans expect. Okay. That's great. It's basically like working on an HD remaster for 10 years. Like that's basically what it would have been. Whereas the way that in which they've done the ending now, they've allowed for so much creativity, which hopefully is what will drive them to get through doing this remake. So yeah, I just thought like, okay, it's weird. It's messy. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to like what's going to happen, but like this must be so freeing for them to be able to create something new and really have fun with the rest of the series.
And I think ultimately, when they decided to do this project, they must have known it was a kind of situation where it's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Mm.
So they had to try and appeal to new people that have never played the original game before ever. They also had to try and appeal to the existing fans who played the Final Fantasy VII when it first came out. And they must have known with that, with the older franchisees, that no matter what they did, some people were going to be antagonized. Like the shift away from the turn-based combat was a primary one. They seem to have won a lot of people over with that, with the gameplay. But, ultimately there was going to be a point where like some people would have just been like, okay, we just don't like this no matter what you've done. So they've decided to take the route of, okay, so the original game is over there. If you love the original game, you still can. It's go play it. We have decided to take this in a slightly different route. And, I don't know what the percentages are going to be in terms of people that are now incredibly excited about what's going to come because they have no clue. They have literally no clue. They're going to see the characters that they love going through a completely different storyline that still touches upon the original, but in different ways. But there's going to be people that are just incredibly bitter about what's happened because it's not what they wanted. And I think when we first played through the game, that was definitely there. We've spent so long diving into the lore of these characters that one of the things we were most interested in seeing was how they built out certain scenes, how they built out the interactions between these characters. And we were looking through, those interactions didn't necessarily build out in the way we wanted. And Nojima touched on that when he was doing interviews pre-release, just saying how, that original game, really restrictive graphics, they didn't have voice acting, they didn't have anything really that could convey the emotions these characters were feeling or how they were speaking, whereas now they do. So every single person that played those games was going to interpret those scenes in a very different way, and they can only get it right for a percentage of those people.
And the other interesting thing is that we kind of predicted the future with this whole thing because we released a video that a lot of people actually thought was really like just silly of us. Like they just kind of thought it was a pointless video. But now I can finally laugh and say that it actually had some merit is that there is a conundrum of two different types of character. So we released a video that was the two different types of Tifa. There's going to be the remake Tifa, and then there's going to be the original Tifa. And like in the video, we didn't really have much of a clue of what was going to happen, but what we sort of thought was that, you know, with them making the remake, we were going to have two different types of character. Like we were going to have the Tifa character that we all know and love, what we've grown up with, what has been in the Dissidia series, what has been in like every single medium. This was the Tifa that we knew. Whereas with the remake, this Tifa was going to be different. This Tifa was going to be somebody who, like, are they going to use this Tifa in future projects if they ever do another like big collab event, or will it be the original Tifa that they use? And like, yeah, I don't know what how we got onto the idea for the video, but we just sort of
It was
thought,
around Dissidia because they
yeah,
announced Tifa in the 7 remake, and then not too long after,
that
they
was
announced
it.
Tifa for Dissidia.
They used the original design for Dissidia instead of the remake design.
And it was just this whole thing of like the marketing for both of those experiences was completely different. You had the remake side where they were saying, well, we got asked to change her outfit because of the ethics commission and all this stuff, whereas then Dissidia released their design where they basically didn't care. And
Mm.
we were like, well, how is this happening? It's because they're two different characters now.
And speaking of like two different characters, even the voice cast is different too.
And that
Mm.
was one of the things they mentioned as well, because they recorded the 7 remake with the original cast, and then the entire video, I think the entire recording was done according to some sources, and then they sacked the entire cast, recast everyone. As far as I'm aware, for appearances like Dissidia and T, they're still going to use the original voice cast. It's only the remake version of the characters that will have the new cast.
I like the new cast for sure, but that really surprised me because in a way they sounded so similar to the original cast. Um, and you know, just a side note here, like the Sephiroth was the one that impressed me the most because it's by Tyler Hoechlin. I think that's how his last name's pronounced. But he's also playing Superman on the CW show for Supergirl, and so I just thought it was pretty cool that they had someone play Superman twice, for the original and for the remake casting for Sephiroth. But do you guys like the idea that it's an episodic game instead of like I know some people were trying to see if it'll be like released all together or had separate discs.
I think the mistake Square Enix made was saying episodic, because around the time when they announced it, you had like Life is Strange, which wasn't. There are games that are episodic. They release in very like every couple of months you get a new part, but those games are really small, and the episodes aren't massive. Whereas really they should have stuck with multi-part series. Like we've made the analogy many times about like Assassin's Creed, Mass Effect. No one has a problem with Mass Effect being multiple games, because you know it's a long evolving story, and as long as each of those games is a huge fully developed game, like no one has an issue with that. The only issue that people had with 7 remake really was the fact that they knew this, how long the story was going to end. But it's also no real difference to the Lord of the Rings movies they made. Like they could have done that in one movie. They probably could have fudged it somehow, made it like 3-4 hours, but they chose to do 3 very long movies. The Hobbit, they expanded into 3 movies from one book. Very quite a different situation, but like it happens a lot. So I don't really have a problem with the episodic side of things as long as each game is a fully fleshed out game.
I completely agree. And actually, to further that point now, though, with the ending, we actually probably have no clue how many parts this game will actually be. How far are they going to take their new storyline?
Yeah, because
It could
the original,
be,
we don't know if it's going to follow the events, how closely it's going to follow the events of the original.
no.
Like the ending of the first part of the remake had extreme parallels to the ending of the original game. So who knows what they're going to do next?
They just ended to where they leave Midgar, and that's not even like a quarter of the first disc. Um,
Mm.
so like I honestly, I don't know how they're gonna continue on like this. I don't want to say they're gonna milk this game, but it does seem like this game is gonna be quite a while for it to end, especially on the level that they're how they made it. You know, like with this remake, just the interactions of the civilians walking through Midgar and all the scenery and the cinematics like that. That's a lot for just one game like that, and for the length of the game compared to the original game where Disc One ended right after Aerith gets killed.
I guess the thing is that like they can only take it so far because at the end of the day they gotta sell copies, and I think like if the game is, they don't want to let the game go on too long to where nobody's interested anymore and they're like not selling like any games, you know, like they need to stop somewhere.
And that's, I think, one of the concerns people have had so far is that this remake, the first part, ended in such a huge, overblown fight. You get to fight against Sephiroth straight away. How are they going to top that? What are they going to do?
That's
And I
true.
think that's the difficulty because, like, I mentioned Mass Effect. Mass Effect 1 did pretty well. Mass Effect 2, like, shot that out of the water. But typically with Final Fantasy games, the sequels sell a lot worse than the original game. Like, they're lucky if they get half the sales of the second game than they do the first. And with the remake, they can't really afford to do that. Like, I'm sure they're expecting or hoping that they can increase or keep the sales similar. And I guess that was also kind of their intention with making it go this way, because if they did the remake as a straight remake, the sales would kind of tail off. Now though, there's people don't know what's going to happen, and as long as they do the marketing in the right way, like the whole thing around Zach, at the moment no one really knows what's going to happen, but that could be a big thing in the marketing, is to get people really excited about the next part. It's just going to be very very interesting to see what they do. It's
So,
probably going to be 3 to 4 parts though, I would have thought. Like, it's, as you said, it, Lauren, if they overblow it too much, then people will just get bored of it, I think.
Mm.
do you guys think that what was I gonna ask? Like, do you guys think that the sequel would that? Do you think that'll determine if the franchise for the Seven remake is gonna last? Then
I think they need to finish it no matter what. I mean, like they showed with the 13 trilogy that they're more than happy to let things ride out. I mean, Lightning Returns, I don't think it even sold 1 million copies compared to the original, which sold like 6 or 7 million, and it didn't really make them much money back, Lightning Returns. But they wanted to finish the story arc, so they did it. I think the 7 remake, it's like, even if the sales dwindle down, I mean, this one's already sold like 3.5 million copies in the first 3 days, despite all of the problems that we're having right now in terms of distribution. Like, the 7 remake part one is going to sell easily like 10 million, I would have thought, by the end of it. And if part 3 and 4 they're down to like 3 to 5 million, then that's still really good for them.
right, they still kind of make up for the lost sales. Time flew by just speaking with you guys. I do have one or two more things before we wrap up here. I wanted to ask you guys just to let fans know who are your guys' favorite Final Fantasy characters? Because for me, it's a mix between Zack and Tidus, but I gotta say Tidus is my favorite character out of the entire franchise of Final Fantasy.
It's such a complicated question because I have like favorite characters for like different situations. I mean, I also love Tidus. Like I think yeah, he's my favorite character that I just want to hug him. I just love him so much. I think James Earl Taylor did him so well. Like I think that his voice is perfect for Tidus, and he made him such a lovable character.
I think for me as well, it's definitely Titus. I think we doing the podcast for a long time, we obviously get a feel for the community. And I think over the past 5 to 10 years, there's been a general swell of negativity around 10, especially with the whole meme around the laughing scene. And Titus typically got portrayed as this really annoying character who just like bugs people. Like, some people didn't really get on with him. And I think when we were doing the Origins videos, doing Titus, we really wanted to shine a light on him as a character, because I think out of any of the ones that we've done, he was the one that felt like he was most misinterpreted by the fan base. But really, he's such a strong character, and the fact that you think about all the other protagonists, and yeah, sure, they want to save the world or whatever, but none of them saves the world to the point where they're willing to give up their own life, apart from Noctis.
Mm,
He kind of like was done it more recently, but I don't think Noctis's story arc is anywhere near as compelling as Tidus's.
mm. I guess in a way, like Zidane as well. Like he was kind of like on the edge of like I'm gonna do this and I might not be coming back. Like he probably was the closest, and he is one of my favorite characters as well. But I feel
Yeah,
like I also
many of them make the like they're like,
yeah
yeah, we know we're not coming back, maybe,
yeah.
but they do come back.
But Titus was like definitely like guys, I'm probably dead now, so I'm sorry, but I'm like I'm gone. I'm gone.
And that whole scene where he tells them, and
Oh,
he's like made
it's
that
so
it was just
sad.
that whole storyline was so fun
I
because,
know.
well, not fun, but it was just interesting because they were constantly all making decisions that they knew would impact everyone else, but they never told them.
Hmm.
And then they always left it for like this kind of kick on moment. It's like, oh yeah, we're in this fight against you, Evan. By the way, guys, if you kill these summons, you're gonna kill me too.
Yeah. BT dubs. All right, let's kill them. Go on. Let's do this. But I mean, I feel like it would be a disservice to not mention any female characters, because Final Fantasy has like a million fantastic female characters. And so like I mean, Tifa is always the one that I come back to because she's so sweet without being annoying. Like she's just not that sort of stereotypical girl. But then Celeste as well in 6 is also my like ultimate like boss bee. She's a warrior. She is strong. She has a really great backstory, a really fantastic arc in Final Fantasy VI. And yeah, I love her. So Celeste is like
It's Freya as well.
Freya as well. Yeah, so many great female
I
characters.
think Tifa is another character who gets pigeonholed. Like
Mm,
there's a lot of people that don't really understand the depth of her character, and like especially in the younger scenes, like she's portrayed as this really confident girl. But I think in the remake they did a good job of showing that she isn't actually that confident. Like she isn't that sure of herself. She's actually quite shy. But because I guess she's attractive, and when they show the flashback scenes to when she's a kid, like she's really popular with everyone. She's the center of attention. But because of what happened, like that side of her just got destroyed.
mm,
And I think in the original game, the scene right at the end, when you're doing the disc swap between 2 and 3, when it's Cloud and Tifa alone, it really shows that Cloud and Tifa aren't actually that dissimilar. Like they both have feelings. Neither of them wants to actually talk about their feelings. Neither wants to actually make the move. And that scene was just so good for showing the dynamic that exists between them and the types of people that they actually are.
But I also wanted to ask you guys as well. I know you guys do like interviews with voice actors. On your website, you guys listed that you guys had like interactions with the 13 cast and the Type Zero cast. Have you guys considered trying to reach out to like James Arnold Taylor or any of the 10 actors at all?
We we haven't done any voice actor interviews for quite a while, and I think it's more based around the situation we find ourselves in than
mm,
anything else. Because when we used to do these interviews, it was we could record at any time. Like most of the actors are based in LA, which is 8 hours behind where we are, so there's a really short recording window that we can have around it. And I think, yeah, as we've had children, and obviously we both work full time as well, it's become more and more difficult to try and find the time to actually do the interviews. But when we did them more aggressively, let's say, it was so much fun. Like, yeah, talking to Ali, I think we've spoken to Ali Hillis 4 times, and she is such a fun character. And obviously, when we did the Type Zero interviews as well, that was such a fun experience, but also an experience that was incredibly demanding.
mm,
We were having to sometimes we would go up to London to record the interviews in Square Enix's office with obviously Dan Sito, who worked at Square Enix at the time, and we would sometimes be there for 5 hours, I think one time we didn't get home until 3 o'clock in the morning because we were doing like 3 interviews back to back.
I was like pregnant at the time as well, and
Oh,
like
wow.
newly pregnant. So I was like nauseous portion of my pregnancy. It was not fun.
So yeah, it was a kind of labor of love for a period of time. And yeah, obviously with 15, we spoke to John Campling and Liam Mulvey, and then we did Ray Chase a little bit after. But it was just, yeah, it's something that we really enjoyed doing. It's just that we haven't necessarily been able to find the time to fit it in with the more recent games.
I look forward to, like, hopefully if you guys do get better timing, to do more interviews with the voice actors for sure. Because I've tried reaching out to James Arnold Taylor's team and stuff, but no one's responded back yet. So I'm just gonna leave it out there. um,
Some of them can be quite hard to track down. I think when we were doing the Type Zero cast, we did it by ourselves to start off with, and we emailed obviously like most of the cast. There's so many people in that game,
Yeah.
and we only heard back from Jonathan McClendon, Bryce Hitchcock, and Orion Akaba. And then when we managed to kind of get the official go-ahead with Square Enix, most of the cast suddenly were very interested.
Yeah.
oh, okay. But thank you so much, Daryl and Lauren, for being on the podcast here. There's so much more that I wish I could talk to you guys about. But maybe in the future we can have a part 2 to this, and I had so much fun just talking Final Fantasy with you guys. And again, I appreciate what you guys have done so much, and for just being able to be on my podcast, and just being fellow podcasters and to just share our content. And with that in mind, do you guys have any plugs or and let fans know about your social media accounts as well?
Oh, sure. And thank you. Thank you so much for having us on. I mean, any chance to talk about Final Fantasy is a great time for us, really. And in terms of plugs, you can follow us on FF Union, and then our YouTube is FF Union Vids. Daryl is not so much on the Twitter sphere anymore, but I am at Level Up Lauren, and when he does tweet, and he tweets his lovely tweets, Daryl's is Daryl at Daryl GU, and yeah, we've been doing lots of stuff. We're Twitch streaming now as well. We're streaming Final Fantasy VII Remake on Lazadar, and yeah, I think that's it. I think that's my vomit of where you can find us.
And all the information can be also found on your website as well.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Again, thank you guys so much for doing this. And I look forward to more of your future videos as well. So, and I hope the best. I hope the best for both of you.
Oh, thanks.
Oh,
Same
thank
to
you very much.
So this is the end of episode 55, you guys. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune into more Final Fantasy Union videos on their websites and social media. And yeah, have a great day. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and rate Spoiler Force Podcast. For comments, questions, or criticism, you can email me at rickyvang92@gmail.com or message me on Instagram at instagram.com/rickyvang92.